Questions and doubts are a common and necessary part of every journey. They help find the best answers to life's hard questions and to challenge long-held beliefs that might not actually be true or proven or healthy. They can keep us from harm or help us to escape bad situations. Sometimes our questions and doubts can set us free, but they aren't easy, and these trying times can make us feel even more disconnected, desperate, and alone. But you are not alone. Recovering from Religion is an organization comprised of people just like you, people who have asked questions, who understand doubt, who can help you navigate through the confusion, and who are genuinely there to help. 24 hours a day, any day, you can reach out for encouragement and support on the telephone or via online chat. And RfR even provides online communities to connect with others just like you, even if you choose to do so anonymously. Recovering from Religion is a safe place where you can reach out, explore your questions, converse with a friend, and be completely yourself without fear. No judgment, no rejection, just an opportunity to connect with someone who understands. There's no reason to go it alone. Recovering from Religion is ready whenever you are. Reach out today at recoveringfromreligion.org.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. I am Amaia Perez. I'm the online programming director of RfR, and I am also your co-host today. And I am here with Eric Wells, who is the support group director and also our co-host. So welcome, Eric, and thank you so much for being here today once again.
Oh, thanks. I'm really glad to be here. Like at the beginning of every RfRx, we're going to have a poll. And this poll is designed to kind of get you thinking about what the topic we're going to talk about today. And we've got 3 questions in it. The first question is, can you be completely honest with your partner about your sexual thoughts? Yes, no, or I don't know, or I don't have a partner. Question number 2, do you trust your partner or partners? Do you trust your partners know you as a sexual being without judgment or shame? Yes, no, I don't know, I don't have a partner. Question 3, is there anything you desire right now that you are not getting? Yes, no, or I don't know. So those are the 3 poll questions we've got for today. In addition to that, we want to welcome the atheist community of Austin. I think they've changed their name since then, but they are streaming us live into their Discord server, and we're going to send a link in the chat to the Discord server, and it's a great community to join and have fantastic discussions. Anything else? Nope, that's it. Amaia, tell us about RfRx.
Yes, so as I always say, RfRx is a series of online weekly sessions in which we bring in guests to discuss different topics that are relevant to anyone who has left religion or is interested in any topics that have to that impact people who have left religion. This is in no way a replacement for the support groups or the RfR online community. It's more of a complement to the services and also a way of providing good advice and coping skills to anyone who needs them right now. So if you want to send us any sort of feedback, any video ideas, any, I don't know, guests you want to bring in, anything at all, you can do it to our email address, and that is rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. And if you want to watch any of our previous RfRx sessions, you can watch them in our YouTube channel, and that is youtube.com/recoveringfromreligion. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, all the links that we mentioned will be in the description down below, so you won't have to worry about any of them. And now let's just jump to what we do in RfR as a charity overall. So in RfR, our mission statement is that we offer hope, healing, and support to those who are struggling with issues of religion and non-belief. So Eric, let's start by explaining hope, please.
You bet. So we offer hope through the sharing and listening to personal stories. So we're kind of all in this together, and many of us experience a lot of the similar things that when we are doubting or when we're coming out, or even some trauma that we've experienced. And so the sharing and listening and telling of stories can be very beneficial. It can give folks light at the end of the tunnel, and give us some hope, something to look forward to. Like, if they got through it, then I can probably get through it too. And we have that. We have those stories in our podcast and in our blog. And so I think I've mentioned this a few times, but we have a blog over at Medium X Communications, medium.com/excommunications. You'll see all those links in the chat. What about healing, Amaia?
Yes, so healing comes from our helpline, and this is basically a place in which our helpline agents will listen to you with an empathetic ear and no judgment or criticism to any issues that you may have, which are, again, related to religion. This is a completely confidential, available 24/7 and safe resource. So if you feel like you could benefit from it, please do visit our website, and you will find very easy to contact us. There is like a mini bubble at the bottom of the screen, and then you can either chat or phone call, as I said. Apart from this helpline, we also have just lots of resources in our resource page, and this includes everything from books to podcasts, articles, videos, just anything you can imagine, you will find it there. So I highly recommend you check it out, because it's also organized, sometimes depends on the topic. So if you're interested, for example, in the fear of hell, you will find a few resources related to that. Or if you come from a specific background, you will find maybe specific resources about being an ex-Jehovah's Witness or being an ex-Muslim or whatever it may be. So it's really just a great website to visit if you feel like you could benefit from reading something or listening to something that may be encouraging or helpful to you in this sort of recovering from religion context. And now, Eric, please, will you explain support, since you're the support group director?
Yes, I love the support group side. It's fantastic. I'm the support group director, and I've been a support group leader for about 5 years now. And it was something, as a leader, that really helped me kind of work through some of my own trauma and struggles that I had coming out of religion. So with support, we have peer support groups, and they are scattered all across the world. And they have some fantastic support group leaders there who are trained to kind of just facilitate a meeting and facilitate the conversation and provide and create a safe space for folks to kind of express things that they may not feel comfortable expressing in some of their other religious communities. So you can find the nearest one to you at our website. And if you can't find one that's near to you, we're actually starting up a virtual chapter. And this is to help serve folks who are nowhere near a support group. Even though now we're all doing them online instead of in person, feel free to join any active group. But if none of those will work for you, then we're working on putting a virtual one together. In addition to that, we've talked about the helpline, we talked about the support group, and those are both peer supports. None of the folks there are professionally trained, but there are some times where we're going to need more than just what peer support can offer. And so RfR has set up the Secular Therapy Project, and the Secular Therapy Project is a place where we as clients can connect with vetted secular therapists. They've been vetted to make sure that they have the appropriate licensing in their state or country, to make sure that they run a secular practice, and so there won't be any risk of being proselytized to. And also to make sure that they run an evidence-based practice as well. You can you can connect with secular therapists in your area at seculartherapy.org. What else do you want to talk about, Amaia?
So I just want to briefly mention our online community. Basically, this is obviously like a platform in which you can chat and meet people with similar backgrounds as you. So we have different groups. It's organized via groups, and we have, for example, for females only, we have it for Australians, we have it for LGBTQ+, we have it for Black non-believers, we have all sorts of different groups. And it's just a good way of being able to meet people who really understand your situation and, you know, come from the same place as you do. So if this is something that, again, you could be benefiting from, all you have to do is contact one of our helpline agents. And this is done, once again, via online chat or telephone call. And if you meet the requirements that need to be met in order to join one of these groups, they will let you know how to join one of these And I think it's just a great resource to use, especially if you're quarantining right now. You may not be able to connect with people that really do understand your situation. So if you feel like you could benefit from it, please do contact us. And then before we jump into the meeting structure, I just want to do a mini volunteering advert, because volunteering in RFR has been such an amazing experience for myself and for so many others. Our volunteering team is growing every day. And I think one of the reasons why people stay is because we have an amazing community amongst volunteers. And if you have a bit more extra time in your hands, or you feel like, you just want to help out, we have lots of different roles. So I'm sure we will find something for you. We'll always appreciate anyone wanting to offer their free time. Everyone that's working in RFR does it voluntarily. So if you feel like you would, you would like to join us and be part of our community, part of our family, all you have to do is go to our volunteering page, and that is recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer. And I think that's it for me. Now, Eric, do you want to start with the meeting format?
Yes, I do. So today, just like every other meeting, we've got an hour-long discussion about our topic, and it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a really, really good one, as you can kind of see from the questions. Hopefully that kind of helped jog your thinking a little bit and get you on track to where we're headed. So after that, during that 1 hour discussion, or maybe a little bit longer, you're probably going to have questions, especially with this topic. I think that you might have some questions. And if you do, please type them into the chat, both here in Zoom and also over at Discord. We're going to be monitoring those, and we'll gather those questions up and ask them during the second half of the discussion, the Q&A session. That's going to last about 20 or 30 minutes or so. After that, we're going to hear from our founder and president, Dr. Darrel, all the way from the somewhere in Kansas. I don't know where he is. I don't know where he is, but we're going to hear from Dr. Ray, and he's going to be joining us after that. Then we're going to shut the recording off, open up the lines, and we're all going to just hang out like we always do every week. So it's going to be great, great, great. All right, Amaia, are you ready to do this?
Yes, I'll be very, very happy to introduce you to our guest today, and that is Dr. Stephen Davidson. And the topic today is sex, so I'm sure everyone is going to enjoy this topic. And I'm just going to give you a brief introduction of who Dr. Stephen is. So Stephen is a psychotherapist and sex therapist in private practice in Fort Lauderdale, probably pronounced that wrong, Florida. He sees clients at his office or online via teletherapy. His clients are individuals and couples from all walks of life who are seeking solutions to sexual problems. And also, fun fact, Stephen was also one of the first team members who created the Secular Therapy Project, which is incredibly amazing. And I think Dr. Ray told us before that now we have over 400 therapists registered, so that is completely mind-blowing and amazing. So thank you, Stephen, so much for being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you for that introduction. And just to clarify, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Thank you. Yeah, no, English is not my first language, as you can all obviously tell. So I don't want to know what I did to that word. I do apologize. So Stephen, how would you start discussing the topic of, sexual integrity, which is obviously the title of the session? Because I feel like it's a very, very broad topic and something that a lot of ex-religious people struggle with. Eric, I just cut you there. Sorry.
Yeah, I know what sexual is. I know what integrity is. I'm not too sure about what those two terms put together are, because this is the first time I've heard it.
Well, I kind of decided on this term about 10 years ago, because I was working with couples and individuals, and there were certain issues that just kept coming up again and again, and often related to people's comfort with being themselves, telling their truth, talking openly and honestly with their partners. And so I began referring to this as sexual integrity. And it is broad, but quite simply, it just means being yourself. And that's one of the hardest things for us to do in sexual relationships, because we grow up certainly in American culture with a lot of shame around sexuality. And from very early in life, we are being taught to compartmentalize our sexuality. And so by the time we reach adulthood, so many of us have disowned it. And we think of our sexuality only as some activity that we are engaging in late at night with the lights off, it's after dark. And there's so much more to sexuality that is an expression of our whole personality, who we are as an individual, how we relate to other people, how we love, how we want to be loved. And so my work with individuals and couples is to help them get a lot of clarity with that and to get more specific with it, because they have had a lifetime of repressing and denying or hiding who they are. And so that's why I call it sexual integrity. Integrity is sometimes misunderstood. People confuse it with things like being moralistic or being self-righteous, but it's not about that at all. It's just about being more honest and walking your talk, just being able to be yourself in the world and in your relationships with other people.
That sounds really scary for someone like me coming out of religion, coming out of where I was told how bad it is, and I have to squash those thoughts way back down in the back of my brain, and not even think about that stuff. It sounds very scary.
I think it is scary to most people, and it's a journey. It's not something that, people come and in 5 sessions, 10 sessions, they are done and they're ready to go. It's for many people, it can be a lifetime journey. And I actually have individuals that I've been working with for multiple years who are just taking the next step and the next step toward, we can call it coming out. Yesterday was National Coming Out Day, by the way. But it's not just coming out for people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. It's coming out as poly. It's coming out as kinky. It's coming out as asexual, meaning I really don't want to be in sexual relationships at all. It's coming out as just knowing yourself on many different levels and who you are as a sexual person.
Yeah, I remember, so I'm bisexual and I'm also poly. And I always say that being bisexual has been the easiest thing, like coming out was a non-issue for me. But being poly is like, wow, it's just like, every time you say it out loud and you share it with someone new, it's like such a negative backlash of people thinking that you're selfish or you don't love your partner or you're afraid of commitments, even if I'm in a long-term relationship with my partner, we just happen to be polyamorous. So I feel like it's definitely something that so many people are affected by, because I wasn't raised religious and it was still at the beginning uncomfortable to talk about sex. And obviously now with the whole poly thing, it's like every time I mention it outside my circle of friends, I always get like the look of like, what does that even mean? This like young person with a crazy, like, I don't know, sexual deviations or however you want to call it.
Right. And many people don't know what poly is.
Yeah.
When you try to explain it to them, then they project onto it a lot of things that it isn't. Or, something I've heard other therapists say when they refer someone to me and they tell me that John or Jane Doe identifies as poly, they'll say, well, this is probably just a phase that they're going through, or this is because the relationship that they're in is not good. And so this is what they're doing on the way to breaking up. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about sexuality in all the different flavors and context in which it exists.
Yeah, when coming out of the Baptist religion, there was a lot of propaganda around the word poly, and it was we were always taught that it was those bad, evil Mormons that were poly. Oh my gosh, we were
Polyamorous.
polyamorous, or thank you, and polygamous. Yeah, so that was always like just bad, and I'm coming out of that slowly as I've come out of religion. At the same time, I've had to sort of reshape my thinking, but that was like the very first thing that comes to my mind when I just hear the word poly, other than like plastics or something like that.
Yeah. Well, when people go to see a therapist, there's an assumption that the average therapist out there has some training in human sexuality, and that's not the fact. And so just like we have a need for the secular therapy project, there is also a need for people to identify sex therapists who really are certified and trained in human sexuality. Because when I first became a therapist, it was not my intention to specialize in sex. It just kind of evolved in that direction. I began getting cases that were related to sexual dysfunctions or sexual incompatibility, or things that the APA would say, the American Psychiatric Association would identify as a paraphilia. And I was working in Nashville, Tennessee at that time, and there were not many other therapists who had training in sexology. There was only one other certified sex therapist in the city. And so that's what prompted me to develop this as a specialization and get more training, is because the average therapist out there is not required to take any courses in human sexuality. Yet their license allows them to diagnose and treat sexual disorders. So there is misinformation, often by therapists with good intentions. But it wasn't until I became certified and then went on and got my doctorate in sexology that I really realized how much I did not know, and how I was just winging it. And fortunately, I have always been someone who's very open-minded and tolerant and accepting, and not quick to place labels on people. So I think being in this profession is a really good fit for me.
It sounds like if for a therapist who isn't necessarily trained or exposed, a lot of personal bias can kind of creep in too, unconsciously. Is that correct? I'm assuming.
Well, absolutely. When therapists don't have formal education, their only resources are their own personal opinions or their own personal experiences. And, sometimes you will happen upon a therapist that has done some of their own research, or they've done some reading. They want to get more familiar with the subject, but many therapists are just not even comfortable talking about sex. They may identify as a marriage therapist or a relationship therapist, but they want to talk about communication, or they want to talk about conflict resolution. And one of the things many of us were taught early in our careers is if you teach couples how to communicate, the sexual problems will work themselves out. And that's not true.
Mm. Yeah. I'm kind of like just thinking of my own relationship. My wife and I get along pretty darn well, but I still struggle to talk to her about sex. And it feels weird being kind of so vulnerable right here and right now, but I feel that I'm not the only one. I assume that I'm not the only one feeling that way either, but we have great communication, the two of us, but that's something that I still struggle with.
Yeah, that subject may still feel like it's a taboo. And that's true for many married couples. I see people sometimes who have been married 10, 20 years, and they've never talked to each other about their sexual relationship. And early on, when I would work with couples, I wouldn't split them up. I would always see them together because I didn't want to be put in a situation where one is going to tell me a secret and then I've got to keep a secret from their partner.
Wow.
But I had a colleague who said, as a sex therapist, you've got to split them up because you're not getting the whole story. And there are so many things that they will tell you if they can also see you one-on-one that they are not telling each other. And I found that to be true. So when I begin working with a new couple, I will see them together in that first session. I will listen to how each of them identify the problem or the issue that they want to work on. And then I will split them up and I will see them each individually in the following 2 sessions. And it's there that I always get the meat of what's going on in the relationship, what the problem issues are, because they have been keeping secrets from each other for years. And these are not just secrets about affairs, extramarital affairs. These are secrets about whether or not she's orgasmic, secrets about what he really likes or dislikes. Sometimes it's secrets about childhood sexual abuse that they never shared with each other. And so over the years, there's an accumulation of shame and trauma and myth and disappointments that accumulate that are not getting talked about. And so in the therapy sessions, we are starting to peel some of that away to get to the integrity, to get to the truth, to get to the authenticity.
And how can you, I know this is a very complex question, but how do you do it? Because obviously if someone has lived all their lives being told that they can't talk about sex or that whatever kink they have is wrong, it's probably obviously not easy to not convince them, but like encourage them to open up to their partners and like communicate like what they want sexually. So how do you do it? Like this is just my inner psychologist, really curious about what is the way.
Yeah. Well, it's far more important for me to think about the questions I ask than the advice that I give. And so I just put the question out there and I see how they respond. And I notice the verbal response. I notice the nonverbal response. I notice the interaction between the couple when the question is asked. Some of the questions that are on the poll tonight are questions that I might ask in a therapy session with a client. And I might ask one partner to answer for the other. What do you think Amaia's answer would be if I were to ask her this? Which is a way to see how much do they really know each other.
That makes sense, yeah. And sorry, Eric, go on.
So what would be some of the symptoms of not, like in a relationship of not dealing with this, of continuing, having these desires, but feeling weird about talking about it? What would be some of the symptoms, or what could potentially happen without dealing with it?
Well, eventually people stop having sex. They get
with
distracted.
Each other?
They stop having sex with each other. They may be having sex elsewhere, but often their sexual relationship with each other is suffering. They allow their lives to be distracted. Children are a great distraction. If they don't have children to be distracted by, then they buy a new house and they remodel the house. They work long hours. I've got couples that have been coming in to see me and that I see online since COVID because they're spending a lot of time at home together. And they don't have the distractions that they once had. They're not getting up every morning and going separate directions. And so it is bringing to surface some of the issues in the relationship that they have not been dealing with thus far.
Mm-hmm. So for a couple that is struggling in this sense of not being able to open up to their partners about these topics, what sort of, obviously assuming they're not going to a therapist, what sort of advice would you give them? How would you, if someone is listening to us who is struggling with this, what would you tell them to improve their situation?
Well, I move slowly initially because I don't want to scare anybody off. And I am pretty comfortable talking about sex and asking questions about sex. And I've realized that I'm the most comfortable person in the room with the subject. And so I have to be cautious in how I bring it up. And, it's like sticking your toe in the water and you're testing the temperature. And if that feels tolerable, then maybe I'll go in a little further, and then I'll go in a little further to see how far I can move to allow this couple to talk to each other. I also don't want to set people up to share information with their partner that they're not yet ready to share. And I talk about truth tolerance. I want to know if this is a couple that really can tolerate honesty, because sometimes there's lots of things going on individually that are being ignored or being denied, that no one's talking about. Are they talking about it because are they not talking about it because they don't know it? Or are they not talking about it because it just feels too unsafe to acknowledge the elephant in the room? So sometimes I just have to let the elephant sit in the corner and kind of gradually introduce the elephant into the conversation. Hopefully when the timing is right, and when I know that people are ready to move forward with really doing some serious work. And this is vulnerable stuff to do. Our sexuality, to be open, to be honest, to be vulnerable in that way, that's probably the most vulnerable we can be with another person, because it involves our body, it involves our heart, it lets people see aspects of our vulnerabilities and our insecurities. And so I move cautiously with couples to begin to broach these subjects.
What about for people who are in a relationship in which the other person isn't ready to speak about these things, but they are? So in the sense that there is an imbalance. So one of them is like really wanting to discuss it, to improve their sex lives, and the other person is maybe just uninterested, but also maybe traumatized, or I don't know, like they just don't feel comfortable sharing their sexual fantasies, or, whatever the issue may be in that relationship.
Right. That actually occurs quite often. I have people who call and say, my relationship is really in trouble. I've talked to my partner and she won't come to the therapy sessions. He won't come to the therapy sessions. Do you think I can make our relationship better if I come by myself? And if we're going to be doing sexual relationship work, then I need everybody who's part of that relationship to be present. And so I give them the option. I say, I'm happy to see you for 1 or 2 sessions, just for a consultation, and talk about some ways that you might be able to communicate with your partner why this is important to you. And then go from there. We'll see if that makes a difference. But that is a big red flag and warning sign in a relationship when you've got one person who says, I'm not going to work on this. Because basically what they're saying is, I'm not going to let this get any better. And maybe they're not going to let it get better because they are fine with the status quo. Maybe they're not going to let it get better because they really don't want to have an intimate sexual relationship with their partner.
Mhm. Understood, yeah. So for, I don't know, if, let's think it the other way around. So if someone who their partner wants to, let's say my boyfriend wants to speak about sex and then I don't want to. What advice could you give to the person that doesn't want to speak about sex? Because obviously it's very difficult to be in both sides. It may be out of uninterest, as you said, but it could also be, other reasons, maybe a very strict religious upbringing or, whatever it may be. So do you have any advice to, I don't know, for people to be comfortable in their own sexualities? Because I know in previous RfRx sessions we had, especially with Praya, who is another speaker, she talks a lot about like individuals being comfortable with their own sexual beings before being ready to share it with someone else. I was wondering if you have any advice in that sort of aspect.
Well, yes, if they are contacting me, just the fact that they've reached out to me, that they've contacted me is a pretty good indicator that they are ready to do some work. And so sometimes I say, well, can I call your partner and invite them in? Would your partner be willing to come in for a session just by themselves to talk about why they don't want to talk about sex in the relationship or why they don't want to work on therapy? And, sometimes I've worked with men with erectile dysfunction, for example, and their wife, their girlfriend is very frustrated. She's very angry. Maybe this has been a problem for a long time. And she says to him, "It's your problem. You go deal with it." And so I will, with his permission, I will contact her and say, in working with him, something I really need is your input. I need you to partner with me on this. I need to hear how long this has been frustrating for you. I need to hear what are the things that you've tried. And so often then that partner wants to get involved because they begin to see that there is some advantage for them to be involved. I talked about the questions that I ask and just kind of feeling out the climate of the couple and their willingness. And so people are more comfortable talking about things like intimacy, romance. They like to use those code words for sex. And so if I have a couple that's doing that and I discover they're just not comfortable with the sexual language, then I'll speak in code. And I'll say, tell me about an aspect of your relationship that was the most intimate memory that you have and what you liked about that. What about that felt intimate to you? So that they begin to understand that there is some advantage for my participation in this. It's ultimately going to improve my relationship.
And what about those people who don't have access to a therapist? Do you have any sort of advice you can give them, from here without having to obviously contact you or someone else who may be in their area? People who maybe can't afford therapy or, I don't know, they're just not ready to take a step yet, I guess. Do you have any advice of things they can do on their own without having to go to a therapy session?
Yes, you can certainly do reading on your own. The American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists is a good resource here for evidence-based information around sexuality. The therapists and counselors that are certified through that organization are good resources to contact. Also, there are educators in that organization that can provide educational materials. Google, I think, is wonderful. Get on Amazon.com, look for books. But it's really important to look at the credentials of the person who wrote that book. And are they actually certified as a sex therapist? Are they actually trained and educated as a sexologist? Because anybody can write a book about sex from any perspective or mindset. It's important to get those books that are written by people who really are experts in the field.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because I've heard that in America, I mean, not exclusively in America, but for some reason I associate it with America, that there is these like religious marriage counselors who also write books about sex, but they're like very Bible based. So I would assume they aren't necessarily the greatest if you want to improve your sex life. Correct me if I'm wrong. They may have great ideas, but for some reason that I don't think so. Not sure.
I don't think they have great ideas. Yeah. Yes. Generally, I advertise on my website because sometimes I've had people contact me and they want to know if I do Christian sex therapy, and I'm not really sure what that is, but the answer to that is no, I don't. And so on my website, I say that I don't work from a religious or faith-based perspective. I work from a science model. If your concerns, if your issues are related to religion in any way, I'm not the person to talk to about that. Now, I have many clients who are parts of different faith denominations and have that in their background. But generally, when they're coming to see me, that's not really relevant, because people who want to have good, fulfilling sexual experiences, well, I'll give you an example. I had one couple one time, and they were swingers, and they had swinging parties on Saturday night, but they had to end promptly at 10 because she was a Sunday school teacher and she had to be at church at a certain time in the morning to teach her Sunday school class. So people can straddle the fence. They can walk one leg in one world and another leg in another world. And if that works for them, then that's absolutely fine. But most of the people that I see are coming to me because they really want the expertise of a sexologist, and not because they're wanting a religious perspective on sex.
You real quick,
Sorry.
tell us what a swinger is.
Well, a swinger is a couple who enjoy sexual experiences with either other individuals or couples. Okay. And they sometimes find each other through online forums. Some cities have swinger clubs, and so maybe they are a member of a club where they can find other couples that they play with. And swingers, each couple is individual. They make up their own rules about how they're going to do it. And are we always going to play together? Or, maybe sometimes you'll play with them and I won't be there to play with them. And so I hope I answered your question about defining what a swinger is, yeah. Eric. But I also need you to just know that it's very broad. It's like people who say they are in open relationships. It's all up and down the spectrum. There are various degrees of that.
And is this a form of polyamory?
Some people might say that it's polyamory. I think of polyamory, polyamorous relationships of having more than one regular loving partner.
Okay.
I think of that as being different from some of the casual sex or recreational sex that might happen at swinger parties or sex clubs. So the families that I've worked with who are polyamorous, they have consistent people who are involved, and they might live with them or they might not live with them. It could be just one other person that they are involved with, or it could be multiple people. But certainly polyamory is one kind of being open, but polyamorous families tend to have some guidelines and a structure around who their family is, who is contained in that unit.
Got it. We hear a lot about folks becoming like addicted to sex, and like for me on the other side, it still kind of scares me a little bit, but I hear a lot about like folks becoming addicted to sex. Is that something that you experience and can work with, or is even something to worry about or real?
Well, it is something that brings a lot of people into counseling. Many people call me or they show up and tell me that they are a sex addict. And that means different things to different people. It also gets referred to as sexual compulsion. I've heard it referred to as sexual impulse control disorder. It's been described as out of control sexual behavior. But it's mostly men who get identified as sex addicts. And my experience as a therapist is that it's generally married men who identify themselves as a sex addict. And the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, is who we look to establish diagnostic criteria for both addictions and sexual disorders. And you will not find sex addiction anywhere in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, except for one line that they added, that sex addiction is not included because they really don't feel like there's conclusive evidence that people are addicted to sex. So that whole word of addiction is kind of tricky. You hear people talk about a shopping addiction and a food addiction. You won't find shopping addiction or food addiction in the DSM either. Certainly people shop compulsively, they overspend. Certainly people overeat, they may have eating disorders, but we don't think of that in terms of it being an addiction. And things like food and sex, the brain is hardwired to desire these things and to desire them often and to desire them in abundance. And the sex addiction paradigm would say, well, you know, when people have sex, it alters brain chemistry. It raises dopamine levels. It raises norepinephrine levels. It raises oxytocin levels. And so people are getting a high off of this. Well, yes, it does, but it should. We want it to.
Yeah.
Oxytocin is very important for facilitating bonding. And dopamine is important for giving us pleasure. And it is also the chemical that causes us to want to repeat things. That felt great. I want to do it again. And then I want to do it again. So given the evolutionary nature of sex and the fact that we get these internal reinforcements, positive reinforcements, we have to be really cautious about calling it an addiction, because we're supposed to like it. We're supposed to want it. And if we didn't, we would cease to exist as individuals and also as a species.
You mentioned sex addiction, shopping addiction, and food addiction, and both of those to me seem like there is something deeper going on, and it manifests itself as wanting to get this rush of shopping or get this dopamine rush from eating food. Could sex be something similar to that? If you think you're addicted to it, there may be something deeper going on.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that I love about studying sexuality is we can learn so much about the personality, about human motivations. And so when people come in and they tell me that they are a sex addict, and sometimes they haven't even diagnosed themselves. Their wife has said you're a sex addict. Their girlfriend has said you're a sex addict. A friend has said it. And so I asked them to explain to me, what is it about your behavior that you think is out of control, is addictive? What are the consequences that you are having? And sometimes this is where we discover the secrets. Well, the consequences are that my wife found porn on my computer, or she found sexual images on my phone. And, there's been some infidelity. There are secrets that are being kept. There's deception. And so that then opens the door to, well, how much are you talking to your wife about sex? How much are the two of you communicating about this? What were your motivations for hiding this? What does that say about your trust in her? Your trust that she know that you're looking at porn? Is that something that you have permission to do? And if not, why not? So it opens the Pandora's box to ask a lot of questions about what's happening in the relationship. It's another reason that I coach people toward this idea of integrity. Anything that you are hiding is something that you're likely hiding for a purpose. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's you're afraid of hurting your partner. Maybe you're afraid your partner will leave. Or maybe you're afraid of rejection. And so if that's the case, then let's dig a little deeper and understand why this shame exists. And when was the first time in your life that you felt rejected because of who you are as a sexual being? So it opens the door to ask a lot of questions and to get people to really think about their sexuality and their life experiences in a way that maybe they hadn't really thought that much about them before.
So I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you work with homosexual couples as well. Do you work with homosexual couples?
Yes, I do. I see gay couples and lesbian couples. Throughout my career, my caseload had mostly been heterosexuals. And individually, it's mostly been heterosexual men, but I do work with a lot of gay men and some lesbians.
I'm not homosexual myself, and so I couldn't really put myself in that person's shoes. But one of the things that I'm imagining is that a person who may discover they're homosexual and is also coming out of religion might have like this double load of guilt or shame for what they were brought in, how their religious background has kind of taught them to be ashamed of sexual thoughts, then also that homosexuality is a horrible thing. Is there anything different or any different kind of struggles that folks who discover they're homosexual and coming out of religion, anything different that you've seen and you need to work with them about?
Well, I think people who are lesbian or gay, bisexual, trans have grown up in a society that has demonized them. By the time they are adults, they have learned that religion is not their friend, that religion is part of the problem in their life. They are not going to be able to be supported by the church. It's only been in the last few years that we've seen churches increasing their outreach to LGBT people. And many churches that are now performing same-sex weddings had the opportunity to do that before the Supreme Court decision, and they use that as an excuse not to. They use that as an excuse to not condone same-sex relationships. So I think gay people are more likely to be able to move out of their religion or discard their religion or alter their religion very early in life than heterosexual people, because you know that you cannot change who you are as a sexual being. And to be in integrity, you can't keep going to that church that's going to condemn you and shame you. So I think that people who are same-sex attracted do have it a little easier coming out of religion also than people who are heterosexual.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense, yeah. Thank you. I feel very privileged that I feel like I was born into a family that was very accepting of the LGBTQ plus community. So I'm always so humbled when people share their stories where they haven't been brought up in those families. And my heart goes out to anyone who is listening to us who has had that sort of experience, because I can't imagine how painful that must be like and how much it must affect your life after. So thank you for being here, and I hope it all gets better.
So what would, how would sexual integrity come into this whole discussion we had previously about the sexual addictions at all? How would we tie those two together?
Well, a sexual addiction model is about shutting down and repressing aspects of your sexuality, pushing it back further in the closet. And the thing with sex addiction is it's a really big bucket. You know, everything gets thrown in there. Affairs, pornography, masturbation, even homosexuality gets thrown in that bucket, as well as any of the paraphilias that are listed in the DSM. All that gets thrown into it, and it all gets treated the same with this model of just say no. And it doesn't work. If you really follow that model, people have a high relapse rate. And then every time they relapse, it reinforces their shame, this sense of failure that I'm already abnormal, there's something wrong with me. And every time I try to stop it, I'm not able to refrain from it. I keep finding myself drawn back to it. So I coach people to really understand what it is that they are drawn to. There's some reason that they're drawn to it. What's the consequence of it? How problematic is it? Most of the things that turn us on or that we desire sexually or that bring us sexual pleasure are not illegal, and they're not harmful to anyone. And so why are you abstaining from this when no one is hurting from it and you really enjoy it? And it might be because, well, my mother wouldn't like it, or I wouldn't want my mother to know. Or it might be because, you know, in my relationship with my spouse, I agreed that I wouldn't do this. Well, maybe you need to recontract with that spouse around your sexual behavior and how you express yourself sexually. And those relationships that can tolerate change, because our sexuality changes over our lifespan of the couple. The couple has to be able to tolerate change also in order to stay sexually engaged with each other, to continue to be emotionally intimate with each other. It brings me back to that concept of truth tolerance. If you are trying to abstain from a sexual behavior because other people in your life don't like it, do you really need to be in those relationships? Can those relationships be changed in a way that they are healthier for both of you? Because it's difficult for us to pretend that we don't like what we like. You know, there are things that we like sexually and they generally don't go away. What we like in our life, we're probably going to like throughout our life. So that's where integrity is important, is getting people, instead of denying and shutting down and repressing, let's step a little deeper into it. Let's lean into it and see what it has to offer you. Psychologically, how is this fulfilling for you? What are you getting from it that you're not getting from just vanilla vaginal intercourse?
Mm-hmm. So for those who have maybe more like unusual kinks, or even kinks that are usual but just not accepted like socially, and maybe they're in a relationship in which their partner doesn't accept that kink, do you have any sort of advice to give to them in order to accept their own kinks, because obviously there's no shame in having any specific sexual desires, and also in how to approach it in the relationship? Because obviously, I don't know, you may not want to just break it off the first time, someone says that's weird, but, I guess there has to be a point in which you have to say, okay, well, this relationship isn't doing it for me anymore. So yeah, I feel like there were like 3 questions in the same one.
Yeah, well, that's why the honesty is so important and the integrity in the relationship is so important. If it begins from a place of permission to tell the truth, then you can share with your partner what that kink is, what you enjoy, and how you enjoy it. And by doing that, your partner may come to understand it and know, well, this isn't something that I want to participate in with you, but I'm okay with you participating in this with other people. And some of those kinks, some of the fetishes are really best enjoyed outside of an intimate monogamous relationship. Sometimes people don't want that to be part of their relationship with their primary partner. They really do want it to be something that they can compartmentalize, because it might not be an exclusive fetish for them, meaning that they are able to enjoy sexuality in a lot of other ways with their partner. And this is just one more aspect of who they are as a sexual being that they might be able to address in another way. And for some people, that's just by looking at images of it, pictures, videos. For some people, that enough is satisfying of that fetish or that kinky behavior.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I've run out of questions to ask.
So I've been corrected by the chat, and I really appreciate it. I understand that before I had used a pejorative term, and so going forward, when we speak about same-sex couples, we'll just use the term gay instead of what I had used previously. So thank you, chat, for correcting me on this. So we've talked about what the harm can get done with when we don't talk about the when we don't talk to our partner about what we like, and kind of talk and what the benefits are when we can seek some therapy or seek some other resources where we can sort of work on this together. We talked about kinks a little bit, but is there anything more that you want to speak with us about on some maybe the real meaning of sexual integrity or intimacy, and kind of how we can find that or understand that more?
Well, intimacy is a very vulnerable experience to have with another person. And sometimes we have intimate experiences, emotional intimacy with people that we don't have sexual relationships with. Sex, love, intimacy, those are 3 different concepts. They are not synonyms. They don't mean the same thing. And I do try to talk to couples about how to use the language, because they may call it intimacy, but they're having sexual experiences that are anything but intimate. And a lot of sexual behavior that happens around the world doesn't happen in a loving, committed relationship. And so getting people to really name what they're doing with language that's more descriptive, I think is important. And helping people understand that intimacy means that I really can tolerate your truth. I want you to be honest with me. It's safe for you to be honest with me. I'm going to listen, and even if I don't understand, I'm going to try to understand. I'm going to validate you. I want to know you better. That is intimacy. It is wanting to know someone on a deeper level. And many relationships that, they're monogamous, but they're not really intimate because they're not being completely honest. And there's fear of telling the other person who I really am.
Yeah, that's something that I struggle with, and I talked about that earlier too. In my own relationship, like my wife is just one amazing woman and just created a super safe environment, but there's still stuff that I struggle to talk about. And I could talk
And
to
what
her
are you,
about just about anything.
yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot, Eric, but what are you afraid of?
I don't really know. I think it's more shame that some of these thoughts are there. Um, I'm getting all the flop sweats, which is fun. Um, yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
just kind of shame, and maybe like there's someone watching that disapproves. Ooh, that's weird.
Yeah. And so if you were a client, I might ask you, where do you think that came from? Who watched early in your life and disapproved? Whose voice are you hearing in your head? I'm not asking you to answer that now, but that would be the kind of question I would ask of a
Okay.
client. Because, thank you for sharing that. But what you shared is very, very common. People are, uh, we feel ashamed. We, we fear that we will be rejected. We fear that we will lose love or respect.
Yeah, or even just be rejected too. Like, you're weird. This is not normal. Here, those things. Even if it's totally normal, just coming from my own background, it was never something I was educated about. It was something that probably happened in the church that I was raised in, but everybody kind of had this unwritten rule about shaming it. And so it's just kind of what I took on, I guess, as a young kid and teenager.
Right. And so that's a good example of how people learn to keep secrets. They don't tell all the truth. They don't ask for everything they want. They don't share all of who they are as a sexual being because they are afraid of people thinking they're weird or
Mm,
abnormal or misunderstanding it. And so people live with a lot of secrets and and denying things that they might really want to experience or hiding things that they are experiencing and then feeling a lot of guilt because they know they're not being um, transparent with their
yeah.
partner or their family. So it feels wonderful when you can let go of the guilt and you can let go of the shame and you can just live your life as a real person and be yourself and be loved and accepted for who you are. And that's so much what recovering from religion is about, is shedding that old stuff that didn't work for you or that was harmful for you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I have experienced that relief, that lifting of the weight, when I've dealt with some other things that I've been struggling with. Um, and so, that's something that I could kind of look forward to happening. Uh, but I think what I'm kind of walking away from with this is like, it would be good to go through the resources we're going to list out, and then possibly even find uh, sexologists like yourself, that, because I'm the one with the problem. It's on my end and not her end. So I should probably be the one to kind of work on it. um, and so if there were, well, let's just like, so me, where would I go to this American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists to kind of find one near me and where I live?
Yeah, yeah. There is a directory on that website, and you can just look in your state and find someone who is close by. And, if they're not close by, then you can meet with them virtually. Even before COVID-19, I was seeing a lot of people virtually because it's just easier. And I'm licensed in a couple of states and I have clients in other states. So it was just easier for me to be seeing people virtually. And now I see a lot more this way.
But you're not able to meet people over state lines, just basically in the state of Florida itself. And is that how most therapists are?
Well, I'm licensed in Florida and I'm also licensed in Tennessee. So the bulk of my clients are in those two states. Being in South Florida, there are people who have homes here and they have homes in other places. And so there are clients that I started working with here in the office, but they're going to be going to their other home or they may travel with work. And sometimes they're in other states when we have their sessions. I also do coaching, which is really more about teaching. It's not always psychotherapy. And so coaching isn't something that you have to be licensed for in any state. But the bulk of my clients are in Florida and Tennessee. Those are the states that I'm licensed in.
Perfect.
Sounds good. Is there anything else you want to cover before we jump to the Q&A section?
I don't think so. Let's jump in. I'm curious what questions people have.
I've got to cool off. I'm sweating a little over here. So why don't you start off and I can get something to drink.
All right. So one of the first questions that we received was, what if your significant other is wanting an open poly relationship without realizing it? Which I'm not sure what is the specific context of this, but maybe you can give some general advice.
What if your significant other is wanting an open relationship without realizing it?
Yes, correct.
Well, if you think that that's hanging out there in your partner's mind, but they are not voicing it, I would recommend just asking the question. I've been wondering, and I'm seeing these signs that make me wonder if you are interested in an open relationship. And so go ahead and broach that topic. I think, I encourage couples to talk about all kinds of topics related to sex, even if it's not something that they're going to be participating in. Mm-hmm. It's just a way of getting to know your partner better and knowing how your partner thinks about it.
Yeah, sounds great. I wish we have gotten a bit more context of the question, but sorry, I feel like maybe we missed it. Okay, so someone else was asking about the females that go into your therapy, because you've spoken a lot about what your male clients get out of it. So someone was wondering, where is the question? Yeah, do women walk away from your work with a deeper understanding of themselves as well? Is there anything specific that maybe you cover with females that you don't cover as much with males? Is there, can you walk us through a bit what the females get out of the therapy sessions?
Yeah, most of my clients are males, and I do have female clients. When I see females, I'm usually seeing them because I'm working with her boyfriend or her husband. And so I'm seeing them in a relationship counseling session. And women in our society are even more shamed about their sexuality and live in even a smaller box than men do. Men have more permission to talk about sex. We are expected to be sexual animals and to think about sex a lot. And so often women feel afraid to talk about sex, to express their desires. They fear being slut shamed. They fear that their integrity will be questioned, their character will be questioned. And so, in the relationship counseling, it's often the women who have more trouble talking about their sexual desires than men. And sometimes they will say, well, nobody's has ever asked what my desires were. I don't even know what I desire. You know, men and women have sex for different motivations. And so I try to get them to talk about what her motivation is for sex. Some of the research that's been done on women and sexuality is that women often don't know when they are feeling sexually aroused physiologically. Mm-hmm. Men tend to know that. Men can identify it better. In studies that have been done with women, they are showing physiological arousal to visual images of sex. But when you ask, they say, no, I didn't feel sexually aroused. And that's been looked at as an example of how women are even more shut down sexually than men and have not had permission to really think of themselves as sexual beings or to claim their sexuality.
Mm-hmm. And related to that question, how often does it happen that a woman walks into your therapy session and eventually they realize that they're not attracted to men? Is that something that is common? Maybe never happens all the time? How well?
I've never had one who came into a therapy session and who realized that in the course of the session, or who realized it in the course of the therapy. I have had women who have known it, but maybe it was in therapy that it's the first time they ever shared it with another person. It's the first time they ever brought the subject up. And so that happens in therapy a lot, that with the therapist, people will share something that they've never, ever told another person. And they feel comfortable doing it with the sex therapist because they know, well, you're not going to run out of the room. You know, hopefully you have some understanding of this. And they feel comfortable doing it because it's not someone close to them. There's not the same risk associated with telling a friend. And so sometimes in sex therapy, people are working on discovery and they are testing out new ways that they identify themselves. And the therapist is a really safe person to do that with.
Another question. So we talked about, you had brought up ED, erectile dysfunction earlier. What is your experience with ED being solved through therapy versus medication? Do you have any thoughts off the top of your head about that?
Well, most of the men that I see who have erectile dysfunction, it is really performance anxiety based. And the medications that are prescribed for erectile dysfunction are prescribed to treat ED that is really more from related to healthcare issues. It's more of a physiological problem. And things like Cialis, Levitra, Viagra, and in their generic forms, those are not psychotropic medications. They don't do anything to treat anxiety. And sometimes men come to me and they've tried those medications and they didn't work. And so that just makes them even more anxious. I took the pill that was supposed to fix this, and for me, it is so bad that even the pill didn't work. Mm. And so we really do work then around the issue of anxiety and helping them learn some relaxation techniques. Also, I will bring their partner in, because when this has happened, sometimes the partner takes it personally. And, you know, I referred to earlier women who would say, well, I'm not going to the therapy session. This is your problem. You fix it. And it's because they feel, they take it personally. They feel like maybe he's not attracted to me. Maybe he's having an affair. Maybe I'm not sexually exciting for him. And I've never had a case where it was any of that. I've never had a man come to me and say, you know, I have a problem with ED because I don't like my wife or my wife doesn't turn me on. Never had that happen. If anything, he feels a lot of shame and embarrassment and frustration because he wants to have a good sexual experience with her and it's not happening.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess kind of connected to that, although not necessarily, but we've had a couple of questions about how to let go of the shame of sex, and especially in the context of purity culture. So one of the questions was, what sort of recommendations, what steps would you suggest for someone who is struggling with purity culture? And then someone else had a more specific question of them being someone who is in their late 30s and they haven't had sex yet because the religion teaches them that they can't have sex outside marriage, and now they're facing with sexual frustration. So how can these people deal with this sort of environment, thoughts, and I guess internalized attitude, behavior? I don't know how to explain it, but yeah.
Well, I think one thing to do to address the shame is to find your tribe, to find other people who are like you, who think like you, who believe like you, because then it feels a little more normal. Then you don't feel so alone in it. And so I encourage people to meet other people who are like them, to seek out opportunities through meetups or clubs, organizations, to do reading. Sometimes I can recommend books and say, you know, here's a good book that's about the subject that you're talking about. And if a book was written about it and people are buying it, then obviously there are a lot of other people who think and feel like you do. And so that's a way of normalizing it. I have worked with people who have tremendous sexual shame because of their religious background. And it's limiting, you know, with those people. Sometimes I've had to say to them, I don't agree with what you were taught in your religion. I really work from a science perspective, and I can tell you what the science says. I can tell you what we know about men and women in general around the world from research that's been done, but it gives very different results from what your religion is telling you. And this is that fork in the road where you've got to make a decision. Are you going to go deeper into your religion, or are you going to go deeper into just what you intuitively know brings you pleasure or you want? And what's sad about working with so many couples who have saved themselves for marriage for religious reasons is they have no foundation under which to understand who they are as a sexual being. And they are very idealistic about sex. They think, well, we just get in a relationship and we get married and everything is supposed to magically work. And that's where they discover that it's not working, because these are also people who don't talk about sex. They don't feel comfortable talking about it. And so they arrive in the relationship and they have no clue about what each other likes, wants, how to connect on a sexual level. They come in with a lot of myth, and they end up feeling very frustrated in their sexual relationships.
Thank you. I had talked earlier and kind of about how I experienced it as sort of shame. Have you experienced folks who, instead of the shame, they feel more threatened, maybe afraid for their safety, if when they talk about this kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, I would wonder, what are you doing? Why exactly are you afraid for your safety?
Or maybe more threatened. I think maybe that is sort of safety.
Well, sometimes there are reasons to be afraid. There are reasons to be threatened. If you are engaging in some aspects of kink or BDSM, you know, I really encourage people don't hook up with someone that you met on an app because you want to try something new. You know, there are ways to experience this. There are legal sex clubs that exist around the country where you can get instruction and
Okay.
where you can meet with the same people on a consistent basis. You can get to know people and form relationships with them. And so I do talk to people a lot about safety. And, you know, sometimes people are engaging in things that puts them at risk of a sexually transmitted disease, or maybe they are engaging in behavior that puts them at other risk. You know, what I certainly see a lot here are in South Florida is the fusion of methamphetamines and sex, and people really pushing their limits, because on meth, they have lost their ability to consent. They've lost their threshold for pain. And so I spend a lot of time
Oh,
talking around
wow.
safety
Oh, wow.
around that, and not putting yourself in situations that are going to compromise your health.
Got it. I think we have time for 2 more questions. I'm going to read this kind of how it was typed in. My husband opened up to me about his problem with masturbation. He wanted to know when he would stop because our religion teaches it's a detestable thing. How can I encourage him? I'd imagine encouraging him to continue to masturbate or to stop feeling like it's a problem.
Well, again, we know that masturbation is normal. Men do it, women do it, adolescents do it. You know, I've only had 2 people in my entire career of 30 years tell me that they didn't masturbate, and I think both of them were lying. So, you know, again, around the issue of religion, any of the religions, except for maybe some of the pagan traditions, are not sex friendly. They don't have anything good to say about sex. They demonize sexuality. They pathologize sexuality. And so, you know, I think since this is the wife who's writing in, just let him know that you don't have a problem with it, that you know that it's normal, that you hope that he gets over his shame and guilt about it. The American Medical Association has said that those men who masturbate 3 to 4 times a week or who ejaculate 3 to 4 times a week have lower rates of prostate cancer, that it's good for prostate health. So our bodies were designed to be sexual bodies. And we have an internal awareness of when our sexual appetite is kicking in, just like we know when we feel hungry for food or when we feel thirsty. We know that also sexually. And so I encourage people to just listen to what your body is telling you. Why are you denying your body? You know, I've worked with men who have denied themselves masturbation for religious reasons. They begin to have a lot of nocturnal emissions, wet dreams. Some of them have infections because they are not ridding their body of semen on a regular basis like it's intended for us to do. So those are some just healthcare issues and facts that I will bring in on this subject. But, you know, religion is probably not going to support masturbation.
How surprising. Yeah. All right. Well, then we only have time for 1 more question, unfortunately. I didn't even use the plural, right? Sorry, it's very late here and my brain is clearly not working properly. So how can we explore kinks in a safe way? Or when one partner is comfortable with exploring some things, but not other things, how can there be a match between both partners?
Yeah. Well, there's not always a match between both partners. And so the first thing I would say is give permission for one to enjoy something more than the other does. But talk about it. Talk about what you like about it. Because many people who engage in kinky behavior don't even want the genital stimulation from it. There is an erotic component to the kind of talk that you have in that scenario. There's an erotic component to what you're wearing. In being tied up, there is a dynamic of power and control that is feeling very erotic to that person. So get to understand all the aspects of what it is about that kink that is arousing for you. If it is something that is potentially dangerous, then you need a mentor. And that could be someone through a sex club. You know, in larger cities, you might find people who do this as a living. They teach sex education classes. They teach education classes around mummifying or around restraint. So taking one of those classes with your partner would be a great way to have some introduction to it. Doing some reading about it. I used to teach consent classes and talk about how to say no and what no means and how to ask for what you want and how to get more clarity about what you want and what you don't want. And that's very important in kinky scenarios, that you clarify, here's the language I want you to use. Here's what you can say and what you can't say. Here's how I want you to dress. Here's where I want this to happen. And many people will spend a lot of time kind of choreographing their scene, their experience. And that's very important, and negotiating it with the other person that's involved. And so I hope that answers that question. But again, just having the good communication about it.
Yeah, it definitely does. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, well then that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much, Steven, for being here. It's been such a pleasure. I feel like sex is one of those topics that we have had more sessions about, but it never gets old. Like there's always new questions and new areas of sexuality to cover. So we really, really appreciate having you here. And it's been amazing. Really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. I think you posted my links, but you can find me at drstevendavidson.com. That's my website, and it's Steven, S-T-E-V-E-N. And then also on Facebook, you can find me under the Sexual Integrity Coach on Facebook.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Eric, is there anything you want to say before we jump to announcing next week?
No, I'm going to go ahead and get the resources and the links into the chat. So Amaia, take it away. Steven, thank you so much for coming on. And I just wanted to echo what Amaia said.
I enjoyed it.
Lovely. So next week, we are actually going to have Dr. Darrel, who, if you don't know who he is, I don't understand how, because he's the founder of RfR, and he's one of our board members. And he has had previous sessions with us before, but we haven't had him in a while, so it was time for him to come back. And he's going to tell us all about religious trauma, its roots and treatments. So just to give you an overview of what it is that we're going to talk about, basically religious abuse is at the roots of religious trauma. And a lot of times toxic behaviors or, toxic behaviors that adults inflict on children, or even children on children anyway, they are toxic and children don't identify them as toxic. So when they grow up to be adults, those sort of, maybe traumatic is not the word, but those sort of experiences have an effect on people, and then obviously it manifests when they're older. And this is something that it can be really, really difficult to identify because lots of therapists aren't qualified to identify this sort of issue, and a lot of people may not even be aware that religious trauma is a thing. So hopefully Dr. Ray is going to walk us through what are the symptoms, what are the treatments, how can we deal with it, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any and all questions that we will all have. So yeah, that will be next week. And as I said before, if you want to watch any of our previous RfRx videos, you will find them in our YouTube channel, youtube.com/recoveringfromreligion. If you have any sort of questions, feedbacks, any topic ideas, any speakers you want to see, send us an email to rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. And what else? Again, you can find our blog and podcast in the links below. And if you're obviously now you're live, so you can see it in the chat. I'm sure Eric will post them. And I think that's pretty much it from me. Eric, do you want to post the poll number 2? The exit poll?
I sure do. All right, folks, thanks for hanging out with us. We've got one final poll, and this is a feedback poll, and it's on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 like being not at all relevant and 5 being very much relevant. The 3 questions are, this program was very relevant to me, or this program was relevant to me. Question number 2, the speaker was clear and understandable. Question number 3, I will definitely attend future programs like this. And the 4th question, we've asked this 3 times and we're getting pretty positive response. Would you be interested in receiving an email with the resources and guest links after the RfRx sessions? So I think this will be the last time we ask that question because we're kind of getting a pretty positive feedback on that. Well, enough about me talking. Why don't we bring on our founder and president, Dr. Darrel Ray, because he's got some closing thoughts that meander through his brain. Dr. Ray, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing good, and I got thoughts meandering through my brain. I did not know that until you mentioned it. But I just have to say thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on here tonight. Dr. Davidson and I have been friends for about a decade. I admire his work. He and I have developed quite a nice long-term and long-distance, unfortunately, relationship. But really, really enjoy what you said tonight. I'll say this, Stephen, the subject of sex addiction always comes up when you, as you all know. And I first got, I didn't even know I was a sex addict until my wife told me that I wanted sex more than she did, so that made me a sex addict. And it made me understand that most people get diagnosed as a sex addict by their wife or by their husband or by their mother or by their pastor or their Sunday school teacher. There is no psychologist that can diagnose that, but your mother-in-law sure can. So that was my experience. And I too have to underline, so Eric, I've got to say these things before I jump into the RfR piece. I have been to so many BDSM conferences with people walking around with crosses or religious symbolism, and you ask them, oh, what's that? Oh, I go to the Baptist church down the street, and here I am tying somebody up and whipping them on a Saturday night. I have no problems with tying somebody up and whipping them. That's what they want to get. I've never quite got my head around being a Baptist and that. Now, maybe a Catholic. You could be a Catholic and be that's a bad joke for Catholics. Anyway, I think one of the things that I heard I'd like to emphasize is that sex is play. It's enjoyment. And I think religion takes the joy and the play out of sex. I never heard a minister once use the word play with respect to sex. So anyway, that's just and of course, I think I wrote a pretty damn good book on sex and God. So you might want to look at that one if you haven't looked at that about. And I actually talked about some of the stuff that Stephen discussed today. So on to RfR. If you have benefited from this tonight, I hope you will find a way to pay it forward. And you can do that in many ways. First of all, you just let people know you liked or enjoyed what we did here today, and invite them to come join us, because we've got darn good programs every Monday night that Amaia and Eric put together. And of course, they're saved, so you can go back and look at others. But it's just fun to be involved when somebody's actually doing the talking, I think, and be able to talk to each other and ask questions. Another way you can pay it forward is to Facebook, like us, get on Twitter, let people know about our programs, tell people about Recovery from Religion and what we can do and what we have done and what we've got available to people who are dealing with the consequences of leaving any religion. And of course, you can donate, because it does cost money to do all these things. And we would appreciate if you would make us a monthly donor. You know, put us on your monthly donor list if you would. And last, and certainly not least, is you can volunteer. As Amaia said early on, we're all volunteers here. All of us are, and I'm a volunteer. Nobody's getting this for the money. I'll tell you that. We just like to help people. So that's my RFR moment for tonight, Eric, and that's all the thoughts that are meandered. No, it's not all, but it's all I'm going to do right now, or you'll kick me off.
Dr. Ray, thank you very much. Thanks for wrapping us up this evening.
Reach out today at recoveringfromreligion.org.